Hi, it's Julie Joe. I can't wait to tell you about the stellar story that inspired the conversation that you get to listen to today. The incredible synchronicity that led to this meeting is so fun. A few weeks ago, I woke up with this strong, loud thought in my head first thing in the morning. It was like a lightning bolt telling me, you need to get your blood work checked. And so I acknowledged this thought, put it away, and went on with my morning. I went to a meeting, and when I returned to my phone, I had a missed message from a family friend, and she had woken up with the strongest urge to connect me with a potential guest for the podcast that she felt in her heart was going to be a very mutually beneficial relationship for the two of us. Now, this woman that she wanted to connect me with is Sadie Kaufman. She has a revolutionary approach to food as medicine, helping people all over the world heal and optimize their cellular health with the Sadie Kaufman Method, which utilizes blood work for in-depth analysis to then fine-tune exactly what your body needs at this moment in time to optimize metabolic efficiency. Is that not crazy? How incredible the synchronization of these strong, striking thoughts that hit us both on the same morning that allowed us to connect. She introduced the two of us, and we had such a fascinating conversation. Let's get into it. Welcome to Star Potential, a podcast where we explore the meaning of our existence while having a few laughs and sometimes tears through stories from the road of life. I'm your host, Julie Jo Hughes. As a stage performer, my life is quite literally about song and dance. I believe that life here on Earth is a playground for discovery, not a contest to be won. We ask questions together like, how do I evolve my consciousness? And how do you sing a passionate ballad when there's an old guy in the front row with his balls showing? True story. Stick around for these fun conversations. Sadie Kaufman graduated from Columbia University with a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology in 1999, expecting to go to law school. But her personal health crisis changed the course of her education and her life. From 2000 to 2006, she undertook an intensive investigation to heal her own prediabetes and hormone dysregulation with food. During this time, she did additional coursework in microbiology and advanced biochemistry, developing a method using blood and urine tests to assess metabolic health. In 2010, she completed advanced certifications in metabolic nutrition and health coaching through the Health Excel Institute in San Diego, California, and the Institute for Transformational Nutrition in Los Angeles, California. In 2010, she opened her metabolic assessment practice that has since grown into the Sadie Kaufman Method, a company that serves hundreds of clients internationally, guiding them to take control of their health and harness the power of personalized nutrition. Sadie's research is ongoing in order to offer clients the most up-to-date and innovative information for using food as medicine. Sadie, welcome to Star Potential.
I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
It's such an honor to have you. You definitely come very highly recommended from a mutual friend of ours. I'm so excited to help spread some awareness about this awesome movement that you've created, what you're helping people with in the world. We're definitely going to dive into the Sadie Kaufman Method, which we may refer to as SKM as we go along. Here on Star Potential, we talk a lot about an old pattern of seeking externally for things. And I like to help people with coming internally, kind of coming back home to ourselves. A lot of times it's about simplifying rather than adding. And what I'm excited for you to talk to us a little bit about today is kind of that old pattern of medicine. Something is wrong, we go to find out what's broken, we take something external to try to fix it. And what you're doing with food and with health, you're helping people look at the microcosm of the cells of the body as they relate to the macrocosm of what's happening in all the systems of the body itself. So we have to go internally to do that. And I'm so fascinated for you to tell us a little bit about that journey of how do we use food to change ourselves on the internal. So, why don't we start off with you telling us a little bit about just tell us what is the Sadie Kaufman method?
Okay, thank you. The Sadie Kaufman Method, in the most simple terms, is an experience of understanding yourself, each person, as a very special microenvironment. So the idea is if we're meant to use food, we run on food. The idea is that the foundation of all healing should be a really clear understanding and sort of confirmation that the food that you're eating in detail is moving you in the right direction. So we call it our food first approach. But the idea is that nothing ever can replace really, really dialed in food for each person. And the idea that there absolutely is no perfect diet, it doesn't exist. There's only the right food for each person based on, we use blood work to sort of locate each client on the map. And once we have the right tests and we really go deep in sort of analyzing those tests, we can see exactly where a person is starting in terms of the efficiency of all these different systems and what foods will move them in the right direction. And that is sort of, in a nutshell, what everything that we do is based on. And so I think of myself in some ways as a kind of a food anthropologist, because
Mm.
the idea is that there is no one perfect diet. And certainly there isn't a perfect diet for each person, but each culture has nutrient dense foods that are particularly valuable for healing. And so that's a big part of our work as well. We work with people internationally. And so we don't typically recommend sort of one superfood that we want people all over the place to be using. We think of superfoods as what are the most nutrient dense foods that are the best and most easy to absorb for you as locally as possible. So that's
Got
kind
it.
of our work in a nutshell. And certainly we work with it's a complement to lots of other treatments and modalities. But again, if your food isn't really working for you 100%, anything, including medicine, is going to have a limited benefit. And so the idea really is about congruency.
Beautiful. Because the food is the building block of the cell, right? The cells are made up of what we're fueling our body with and what we're consuming. Is that accurate?
Well, exactly. And I mean, we've all heard the term food as medicine, and I think most of us agree that that sounds amazing. But what a lot of people don't realize is that food can actually be shockingly powerful medicine. What I mean by this is that we track blood work. Most of our clients do at least one 30-day sort of intensive work with us. And that 30-day intensive includes a list of blood tests, sort of 30 days of very specific dietary guidance in which we're checking in very consistently. And then they do new blood tests after 30 days to maybe 60 days later. And it's so routine for us to see radical changes in the blood work that very often medicines to do the things that we're doing could not achieve what we're achieving just with food.
That's incredible. Now, I'm so curious, how did you discover that you could drastically change people's blood in 30 days? Did it take a while to discover that?
Well, it sounds almost shocking and crazy. And how I came to this is probably even more sort of unexpected. I mean, I think it's appropriate to share just a little bit of my story because
Absolutely.
this wasn't the path that I ever expected really to be on. Um, so basically, I was raised in a very famous vegan community. I was one of the original generation of children born in this very well-known community in Tennessee. And it was based on veganism. And the idea was that if you could raise children vegan and have a whole vegan culture, that would be sort of the new version of living healthy and living lightly on the planet. This was in the 70s. And I was raised in this way, ate all the foods, but I didn't have sort of the health that I always imagined and that I think my community imagined we were creating. And it started with little things, but as I got older, and certainly as I went through puberty, it was clear that something was not right for me. And it wasn't clear what it was, but it started this whole process of starting to go to lots of different types of doctors. I mean, my hormones didn't kick in the way that they were supposed to. And I was 17 without a period still. And then when I got my period, it was very, very irregular. And then, long story short, I was in college in New York City, and I felt like exhausted and with all kinds of just health problems that simply didn't feel correct for where I was in my life. I kept having this repetitive thought of like, this can't be the best it gets. This can't be
Wow.
how I'm supposed to feel in my early 20s. My hair was falling out in huge amounts. I started getting really, really, really weird symptoms. And so the doctor visits sort of escalated, and I started going to all these different specialists, and they were confounded because I was young and thin. And without doing blood tests or anything, doctor after doctor told me, you look fine. Maybe you just have stress. They were kind of just like randomly guessing. And for
Hmm.
me, I just felt broken, basically, in a way that was so scary to be that young and to feel like I'm just some weird anomaly and they don't know what's wrong and it's getting worse, clearly. And it was an awful, very lonely experience. And then finally, I ended up in the office of an endocrinologist at 25 years old in New York City. And this was the very first doctor that ran a list of blood tests as part of his assessment of me. And when we had our consultation based on the blood tests, he was completely shocked. He said, I've never seen this before. You look thin and young, but you have the blood tests of a 70-year-old, very unhealthy. Like, what is going on here? This makes no sense.
Crazy.
Yeah, he
Wow.
was like, your triglycerides are around 300, your insulin is around 20, you have all the things. You have metabolic syndrome, pre-diabetes, you're a mess. And he's like, and looking at you, you just look like a normal young woman. And of course, he was baffled. He was very, very concerned. He thought that basically, in order to kind of make sure that my heart was okay, he wanted to start me on medication, a long list, about 8 or 9 different pharmaceuticals at 25. I
Wow.
still had all my student loan debt. I was just
Yes.
freshly out of college. And they also did, as part of that appointment, an ultrasound of my ovaries. And they found out that they were 3 or 4 times the size of normal ovaries, full of cysts. And he said, you're likely not going to be able to get pregnant. And
Wow.
I want to put you on all these medications that we never even consider in somebody so young. We don't really know what's going to happen in terms of fertility and your age. And a lot of these your
Oh my
body
gosh.
adapts to. And that really caught my attention when he said, like, these are basically lifelong medications. I
Yes.
was, it was a shocking thing to hear at 25. And that I'm going
Sure.
to be like on these geriatric medications when I just freshly out of undergraduate, just was not the
Right.
life I expected or hoped for myself. And
And
so
you were living a healthy lifestyle as far as
I
you knew.
thought, I
Yeah.
thought. And so
Okay.
he asked me something that changed everything. And it was one of those offhanded questions from a doctor in an appointment. But he said, well, what do you eat? And what did you eat when you were a kid? And I said, well, I was raised vegan and I kind of eat that way now because it's what I'm used to. And he said, oh, I don't know much about nutrition, but you probably wouldn't have all this premature aging now if you had been raised on a more normal diet. Now, that was the very opposite of what I ever imagined that I was being prepared for in my life. I thought that me
Right.
and my family would be healthier than everyone else. And to
Yes.
hear that I had premature aging and may never be able to have kids because of my tofu and soy based diet was just, it was like, it almost like jammed the system. I couldn't understand
Yeah.
what I was hearing.
Cannot compute. Yeah.
No, it was like I think my jaw was literally like on the floor. I was
Yeah.
just speechless. But the doctor gave me a list of, I guess he gave me all this information about the side effects of the medications he wanted to put me on. These were high blood pressure medications
Mm.
for men that he was going to recommend to me off label because he was really afraid of all of my metabolic levels. So,
Wow.
this, because I've always been a really curious person and I had nothing to lose, is what I felt. I mean, at that, in that office, I mean, on the one hand, it was good to hear that something was wrong because I
Mhm.
knew it. But on the other hand, it was just the most extreme thing to hear at such a young age. He was kind of telling me, like, you won't have a normal life. This is what your burden is in this life. And
Yeah.
so it gave me, I got like a fire lit under me. And I said to him, give me 6 months, please. I want to wait before I start these medications and let me just see what I can do. And he said, oh, do what you want, but I don't want you to wait too long because this is very, very serious. And so
Mhm.
with those 6 months, I sort of left that appointment with a totally different perspective. And so I took all of my passion for learning. At that time, I was working at Columbia University, where I had graduated from. So I had access to all of their libraries. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
took the little tiny bits of information that he gave me. He said, oh, you have prediabetes. And I knew nothing at that point, but I thought diabetes have to do with sugar and carbohydrate.
Uh-huh.
So I'm a pretty methodical and careful person. And this really came out intensively when I got this kind of diagnosis. So I did what I do, and I just thought, I'll start with carbohydrates. How many carbohydrates am I actually even eating? So I just carried a little notebook and started keeping track of every gram of carbohydrate that I put in my body every single
Mhm.
day, all day long. And cut to 6 months later, I went back to the same doctor. Now, I knew very little, nothing about nutrition. I was planning to go to law school, but I did this because this was something that made sense to me. And I decided I could at least do this. And when I got the new blood test done, the test results were so dramatically changed after 6 months of experimenting with little information that the doctor first thought that there had been a mistake and that I had somebody else's blood work. For example, my triglycerides went from about 300 to 70 in 6 months. And
Wow.
so, and that just was so amazing to me. And he said to me, oh, we don't talk about nutrition. It's just not what we focus on. And we know that people don't have discipline to deal with food. And I thought, but these differences like that, it just stuck with me. And so that's really where I got
Wow.
the passion to start to follow this thread a little bit more. And at first, of course, I was just following it for myself, but
Mhm.
I ended up being able to modulate my blood work so dramatically and keep it at this new normal and transform my own health and literally reverse my premature aging. I was having the symptoms of menopause at 25, like all of them.
That's
And
crazy.
um, and I reversed it. And when I saw that that was possible, it seemed like it was just too good of news, too exciting to keep to myself. And so the
Wow.
idea was really just simply, so often in life we feel like there's so much, everything's so abstract and chaotic and emotional. And what I loved about this is that underneath all of our ideas about our bodies and about food, that there were numbers, very specific objective numbers that we could work with to give ourselves a guide, even if it was really complicated and confusing like my situation. And so 25 years later, here I am, and I made it into a company, and we work with everybody from 1 day old babies to our oldest client died at 103. And it's always the
Wow.
same blood work. And so it's kind of like this massive experience of pattern recognition. And the beautiful thing that I can report now that I have a team and it's kind of grown is that the good news that I experienced in my own body is it has been replicable in a very, very consistent way. And we've worked with every different kind of circumstance and case. And what I can say is that the body wants to heal. It's not always simple, and it's not always something that only one team or one person can do, but certainly having efficiency in your metabolism around whatever else is going on can only be a help. And that's what this is based on.
Mm. So you're saying every body has the capacity to heal itself and ultimately wants to reach that level of homeostasis, right? And so when you are saying that, you can help people and because you're outside of Mexico City, correct?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so you're working with people all over the world. And so tell us, like, so you're looking at these numbers, and like with yourself, you knew that something had to change in the carbohydrates just because you had that knowledge, like, okay, there's something going on with the sugars here and the
Yeah.
premature aging. And so you were able to look at that. And so because everybody is coming to you with these different numbers of things. So are some of the patterns that you're talking about, is it like, okay, I know when these numbers are high in this specific marker, then this is the food area that we need to look at? Like, are those some of the patterns that you're talking about?
That's a great question. So I started with carbohydrate because in my own experience with my health, I felt like a machine that was missing parts because I would go to all these different doctors and they would all give me a totally different perspective and talk about different things, and I didn't get the sense that they were in any way in touch with each other. And so it
Mhm.
was a really horrible feeling of feeling like my system was missing parts and just didn't fit together, and that none of the recommendations or comments from any of these doctors that I went to seemed to kind of add up to something tangible that then would really make a difference for me. And so I started with just a little bit of information that I had from this last doctor just about prediabetes and carbohydrate. And I started with the idea that we get a guidebook with our car. We know, like, whenever we get some sort of a piece of technology, we read the instruction booklet and we sort of know in general how to maintain this thing and take care of it. And yet we don't have something simple for our bodies. And so my whole sort of premise was, how much information can I squeeze out of simple, sort of accessible blood tests,
Mhm.
and sort of looking at them from every different angle imaginable and pulling really valuable information about each person. So the idea is this, and it was a hypothesis that I've since proven out over the years with working with all these different people and analyzing all these different tests. But the premise was, any of us, no matter what our age, either are dealing with systems that are working efficiently or inefficiently. And because I had this really early aging, so certain systems of mine, for example, sugar metabolism, seem to be breaking down faster than others. And so that kind of gave me a really interesting sort of place to start. I thought, I have this kind of conundrum where I look young but I don't feel young, and
Mhm.
I don't have sort of the hormonal and energy of somebody that you would expect my age. And so it really made me see through the lens of, but I have specific systems that are breaking down and look much older. Now, if they're breaking down really quickly, is it possible to change what I'm eating and reverse that? And so the idea is that we work with blood tests, but we don't look at each test individually. We're working with
Mhm.
clusters of information that the body tells such specific information if you know where to look and how to look at these blood tests. And especially when you look in these kind of clusters together, it's very, very hard to get the information wrong. And the idea is
Mhm.
this, it's really a story of efficiency. The idea, and what I've learned over all these years, is when the body has what it needs, regardless of age, it functions in these different systems and these different clusters of markers much more precisely. And you can think of this in terms of any kind of machine. Like, the more that the machine has the fuel and the exact quality and quantity that it should have, and everything is delivered as expected, it will function in a very precise way. It starts to deviate from that when it's missing key components of what it's expecting. So
Mhm.
that was my hypothesis, is that if this is just an incredibly high powered, detailed machine, perhaps we can treat it in some ways like other machines, like assess it in terms of its efficiency. And that's really proven out. So what I've seen now is that so much of our idea about aging and about what it means to be young and what it means to be older are just incorrect. That really there's a much bigger story here about efficiency versus inefficiency. And young people like me, when I was in my 20s, I had systems that were wildly inefficient and nobody could tell. And the reason I understand it now that I didn't understand before is when you're young, the big difference between younger and older is younger people have more energy to cover symptoms and make the whole problem much more confusing. So the body is overcompensating for all this extra work in a way that you don't see it obviously. It becomes
Wow.
kind of confusing. And as you get older, you have less extra energy to cover the symptoms. So the symptoms will probably be very similar from a very little
Wow.
kid to an older person. And in fact, we can spot the weak points, we call them metabolic weak points in children, and really avoid them having to manage them and deal with them all their life when they're 5 and 6 years old. But
Wow.
that's the big key to this work, is that we have all these biases about youth and age that are actually distracting. And when
Mhm.
we look through a different lens of metabolic efficiency, there's a lot more clarity and there's a lot more guidance of what does this body require to function better so that you can actually be supporting the work of your body in a really sort of specific and clear way.
That makes so much sense. And when I was looking through your work too, I got so inspired thinking, especially in the West, modern medicine has gotten very, very compartmentalized and specialized, right? And
Right.
so I feel like we have these wonderful doctors that if you have some very specific thing that you already know, like some doctor has determined that's the problem, maybe they can help you with that thing. But what is the underlying thing that like led us to get there to that inefficiency, right? And so this is where your work comes in and you can help people kind of take back sovereignty of your own being in touch with your own body and being able to fuel your body in a way because the doctors they haven't been trained necessarily to look from the higher perspective and go what is the missing fuel component here, like they've been very very trained and specialized to treat this thing
Yeah.
perhaps. And one thing you mentioned was like in younger people, I feel like a lot of times we're probably just not testing these things, right? Like as you're getting older, it's like, oh, I've got this problem and this problem and this problem. More problems have become apparent. And so now we're looking for things. Now we're running our blood. Now we're looking for the problems. But for instance, I was thinking about my daughter. She's 7 years old. She's had this chronic inflammation in her nose for years. I was worried about it like affecting her speech when she was first learning to talk. I felt like
Yeah.
it was going to affect her speech a lot. I kept taking her to the doctor and they said, nah, if she's not really complaining, it's not really a big deal. And I'm, me being very, like very non-toxic. I'm very holistic minded. I'm thinking, yeah, but why is that? Because that's not like
Yes.
a normal. And so, I'm excited for myself to start working with you. But the past couple of days, it dawned on me, we can run my daughter's blood and maybe you can help me finally solve this puzzle piece of what's going on there that she's been allergy tested and they haven't really found the allergy. I've done some diet elimination with her just on my own. We haven't really solved this puzzle. What we haven't done is taken a close look at her blood to see like what's
Yeah.
going on in there. And
Yeah.
that's what's so exciting about your work is that, as you said, it's not necessarily about being young, old, or whatever. It's have you ever taken a full picture of what's going on? And
Yeah.
whether you're having symptoms already or you're not, you can help us get to that optimum metabolic efficiency, right?
Well, that's the I love the example that you're giving of your daughter, and it really it reminds me of sort of one of the things that I think is so important about our work is a lot of people feel like they have to choose a path, like alternative versus conventional, and there's a
True.
lot of friction there. And this work is very different. It's the idea of using the right tool for the job and really not taking anything off of the table. So what I say is most doctors are specialists, and that's not good or bad. They know
Hmm.
what they know, and that can be incredibly valuable and life saving.
Right.
But what we are the extreme generalists in a sea of specialists. And what
Mm,
you need the foundation and the context and the base to be in order to get the benefit of any other level of treatment. And if you don't, you can go to the very best specialist and it's going to work in a very limited way at best. And so that's really what our job is. We work around, we have clients who are dealing with advanced cancers sometimes, and it's never an either or. It's,
mhm,
we want you to do everything that can give you the best possible results. And we work around specialists to give the best, sort of move things in the right direction in the absolute most consistent way. And we have all these different lenses as part of our work that are just unfortunately not used and not considered. So one of them is we have 10 times, a human body has 10 times more microorganisms that are not human cells living with us, cohesively with us. And if those microorganisms, it's kind of like we're these vertical gardens or these sort of micro environments that
uh-huh,
if those microenvironments are out of order in very specific ways, and we've got colonies of bacteria or yeast dominating certain areas, it's going to suppress our immune function and it's going to give
mhm,
us symptoms that could be extremely confusing. But
mhm,
that's again one of the lenses that we look at, and we can use very specific blood tests to really see objectively what's the balance here and what
mhm.
can we do in the least aggressive and invasive way to really change this environment and change the result in a very timely way. And that can be a step in the direction of maybe even a medical treatment or a pharmaceutical treatment. A lot of times our diet is working against the treatment that we're taking. And so you're going to
Interesting.
get confusing results at best. But when you change that and you reduce all these sort of micro inflammations that you're
Mhm.
getting from the things that you're eating all the time, you have this much more clear and dramatic response to anything that you take to address a specific issue or symptom.
Interesting. So I think what I hear you saying is once we really dial in the nutrition that's right for you at this moment in time, even the medications that you're taking are working more efficiently, and treat any other treatments that you might have to take for any kind of medical condition. We're just supporting that environment so everything is working more conducively.
And we're tracking our work. So there
Okay.
again, we're not working from some sort of idea of healthy. We're working with what is healthy in this environment, and then we're tracking that. And so, for example, like when we work with, we've worked with kids in active chemo, and so much of the effect of chemotherapy is affecting the absorption of certain nutrients and macronutrients in the body because it affects the intestine. There
Mhm.
are ways of sort of adapting the diet to make it even easier to absorb these nutrients. And what we've seen is that those kids fare so much better in chemo. The chemo drugs are the same, the kids are the same.
Wow.
And so that's like an extreme example of what we
Mhm.
see just in general, that when you work around whatever is sort of the most dominant thing that this body is dealing with, when the body has to work less hard to extract the nutrients from the food, things go better in a very real way.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, Sadie, I'm going to take this little segue here because we're talking about making our cells work more efficiently so that they can be conducive to the treatments and things like that. There has to be kind of a spiritual component here as well, right? I'm wondering if I would think it's another kind of branch in our, or tool in our toolbox. So we're having you
Yeah.
help us with the right nutrition. We're going to our doctor to dial in any kind of treatments we might specifically need. But is there a component here, in your opinion, and from what you've seen, when we can kinda elevate our consciousness or raise our vibration to a place where we're not in survival mode, fight or flight, that we can help ourselves to be, in a condition that's conducive to now accepting the fuel in a more efficient way so that this dialed in nutrition that we've kind of pinpointed, now our cell can actually kind of ingest that food and use it more efficiently if we're also working holistically on, not being in stress all the time, on getting enough sleep, on having more awareness of our own personal patterns and things. Does that play a role as well?
Oh, I mean, that is such an exciting question to be able to answer. And there's a lot of things that come to mind, and there's a lot of directions to go in. But where I'd like to start is when I was sick all the time, I really didn't care about anything else. I didn't have much consciousness about wanting to help anybody, frankly.
Sure.
I didn't, the problems of the world seemed very far away from me because I felt like I kind of had a brick wall in front of me, which was my symptoms, my emergency. And the most amazing thing that has come from this work, first with me personally, but then with all of these clients that I've worked with over the years, is this amazing experience of what happens when you go from a cellular state of emergency to a cellular state of sufficiency and abundance, and how quick that can happen, and what happens to your consciousness and your effect in your immediate environment. That's so I call it the law of attraction of the cells. And the way that I like to sort of share this with anybody who's interested is, you can go to therapy, you can meditate all you want, you can have the vision of wanting to save the world. But if your cells are in a state of deficiency and a state of emergency, they're going to be in a battle that is going to be your experience. It's going to be your experience in a way that is, stressing you all the time, but it's also
Mm,
going to be, you're going to be recreating that experience everywhere you look all day long, no
mm,
matter what. And it doesn't matter if you go to meditation retreats or not, you're going to be
mhm.
having that experience, and you're going to be sort of battling with that. And on the other side
Wow.
of that, yeah, if you heal that, and you've always seen yourself as, I've got a family that's bipolar, we've all been through it, and we're all heavily medicated, and that's just who we are. And when I see that, oh, no, you're not actually inheriting the bipolar, you have a cluster, a perfect storm metabolically that's creating this brain and nervous system response that looks exactly like bipolar, but you can't reach it, you can't solve it with all these things that you've done, and least of all the identity that you've created for yourself. And so when we address step by step in the right order the issues that are presenting metabolically, it's so transformative. And that really feels like my art or my contribution in the world is, so many of us want to see a different world, and we want to see change, and we're afraid of what we see. But we literally have like World War III happening on a cellular level that we're not aware of, and we're recreating that. And when you fix that, you literally become the change that you want to see in the world in the most real way that exists. And that's really what my life is about, because that's what happened to me. I felt like my life was in a constant state of turmoil and trauma and drama back when I
Yes.
was in this sort of constant state of emergency. And now, what I like to say to every client is, you can't lie to your body on the cellular level, and your body will never lie to you. And so, if you're living sort of continuous drama, there's many lenses that you can look at it from, but the most tangible one that you can start with, or at least factor in a very real way, is what is your terrain on a cellular level look like right now, and start addressing the deficiencies. And then you don't have to try to be different and try to improve. You can just fix it and be different. And that, to
Mm,
me, is, I don't it's just the best news. I feel like my work, after these 25 years of sort of incubating this work with all of these individual clients, is such good news. And I'm bursting to share it, because what it shows me is the body is absolutely ready to heal, wants to heal, if we just know what to do. And we're no longer playing this Russian roulette of a little good and a little bad and all this confusion. If we can just really focus in on the most important thing in a very ordered way, wild transformation is possible. And it's reflected first in our most immediate environment. Like I tell couples, like, Don't try to improve your couple. Don't try to be a better parent. Just fix yourself metabolically and see the ripples in real time because they just come.
Oh my gosh. It's mind-blowing, and then it's incredibly simple and practical at the same time.
Yeah.
And it is very exciting that, I think sometimes, yeah, we do have these dreams of like, I want to change the world, but what can I do? It's like, start with yourself. That's really the best thing you can do for humanity is look inwards, get yourself in a good place, and you immediately begin to shift your immediate environment, which then just radiates out from there, right? And so,
It's
yes, it's
everything. It's everything.
everything. Oh my
It,
goodness. It's very exciting work that you're doing, and some of the conditions that you were telling that they were diagnosing you with, I feel like those are the ones that we're hearing more and more about too. At least in my circle and my experience, I'm learning of more and more people dealing with PCOS and infertility and perimenopause, of course, like these symptoms that sometimes we're told, oh, that's just part of being a woman or that's normal. And okay, there was something I saw in your Instagram and I noted, I really want to ask you about this. You were linking anxiety and depression to hormonal imbalances. So I would love for you to just talk a little bit about that link and what does that have to do with food and the work that you're doing?
Okay. I mean, this is really getting to the heart of one of my big passions now. So, the method is really about we have a very particular perspective, and we're constantly doing further investigation to deepen the work and to be able to serve sort of different issues that come to us and become important depending on which clients we're serving. And hormones, because my original problem presented as a hormonal problem back in my 20s, it stayed as something that's really, I'm very interested in. And it's like, I want to go deep in that area because I think it's so easy to get the wrong information and to get confused. And so, in terms of women and, well, women and men, of course, we start with food, but we're always looking at what are those central modulators that make the biggest difference in the body. And hormones are messengers to every cell in the body. And so our hormones really are part of this landscape of personalization. So you want to know exactly what foods are correct for you. But as part of that, you want to understand where exactly you are on a very precise sort of map or choreography hormonally. And so the idea where we go with all of our work is looking at two key points. Where exactly are you right now? Whether we're talking about hormonally, metabolically, all these different systems, but hormones are a very key one for us. And where is optimal? Once you have those 2 points, like perfect is what we're interested in. And we're looking at those 2 points, whether we're looking at a teenager, somebody in their 20s or 30s, or a woman, well past in the menopausal transition or in her 70s or 80s. And the idea is this: what I want for everyone that I work with is the same thing that I want for myself. I want this system to work as well as it possibly can for as long as it possibly can. That's the goal. And hormones, we can't have that conversation without having hormones be an incredibly central piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
And what's fascinating to me is that so many women, even younger women, are on medications and all these different things for chronic anxiety or all these different things.
Mhm.
And they've never really understood where they are hormonally in the right context. So they don't know where, like, which tests to do on which exact day of the month if they have a period,
Mhm.
or how to check. And when we factor that in, it changes the conversation really dramatically. So the idea is this: you need a base in order to, we never start with hormones. It's impossible,
Okay.
because if the rest of the metabolic systems are very dysregulated, you're not going to be using even the hormones in your own body correctly. So there's
Mm.
a step one that is you need to take steps to fix the metabolic environment. And we can tell from these blood tests where we need to start, what's the most dysregulated. And all of that is improving the environment, sort of creating a stable base so that we can get into the hormonal choreography. I would like to think of it as like a more precise way of tuning up and optimizing once we have a foundation. But it's relevant for any age person. And because I always run hormone tests as part of our deeper work, I see an epidemic of young women who are not ovulating, even if they have a regular period, older women who are in a state of full hormonal chaos and are taking many, many different remedies and medications that are not speaking to the source of the problem. And I also see men with an epidemic of low testosterone that's causing anxiety and problems in all these different areas. And so we need to bring hormones into a central part of this work and this conversation. But again, the key here is this. You can't just work with something random and expect to get a good result. And you can't just pull something out like, oh, I want my hormones fixed, and do it sort of in an abstract way or separate. Like, I know we have all these specialists and they all want to work in their own way.
Yes.
But that is, especially when we're talking about hormones, it doesn't work that way. And the more improved your overall environment is, the more ready you are to tune up and make the absolute most of your hormones. And you just can't separate that central piece from the whole. You have to be as healthy as you can starting that work.
Yeah, it's kind of like saying if you start with a dirty canvas and you paint over the top of it, that painting can never, it's never going to be clean underneath. You got to figure out what's happening foundationally. Like, that's really step number one. And then we can fine tune on top of there, right?
And move it in. You have to, it's all about continuity and congruence. So the idea is this: you don't want some things going in the right direction and some things going in the wrong direction. That sort of doesn't, it makes chaos, and it doesn't give you results. You just feel like, oh, I'm doing all these things, but I'm not sure, I don't really feel better, and you're not better. When with our work, the whole idea is that we're getting as many systems going demonstrably in the right direction, and we objectively check this work over time, and that gives, it just takes all the abstraction and the sort of so much of the time, especially with hormones, what you experience are emotional problems and identity problems and all kinds of things that feel super abstract. But when you sort of pull the curtain aside and you get into the blood work and the way that we work with it, it's so black and white. It's so refreshing. It's such a relief.
Wow. Wow. Yes, because the emotions and the feelings, those are like the byproduct of 6 steps that came before, right? Like, by the time you're feeling the crazy emotion that you don't know where it came from, that's just the indicator of, oh, something is out of alignment here. But
It's a side effect,
it's
is
a
what it
side
is. It's
effect.
a side
Yeah.
effect, and it's very important, but it's kind of like you're getting just the most surface sort of symptom that, and what's really sad for me, and a huge part of my work, is so many people of all ages come to me believing that this is who they are.
Mm.
It really touches me each time. And I've seen every different age and every different kind of person. And they believe, and they've been told since they were really little kids, like, oh, you're not someone who can concentrate, and you're very reactive, and you're this and that. And all over and over again, every day in my work, I'm saying the same thing. These are metabolic imbalances. You've been asking your whole life, and other people have been asking for you, like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with this? What's wrong with that? And I always find myself saying, you're asking the wrong question. Your body is responding exactly right to imbalances that you've never been aware of. And once you are aware of them, you can start the process of correcting them and separating who you are from these metabolic processes that have been just doing their best to manage in a very disordered situation. And it's always such a nice experience, and it really is so touching for everybody who hears that.
Wow, wow, that's just incredibly powerful. So it's something that we've maybe taken on, like you said, as our identity, and we thought, well, there's just something wrong with me. I've always been that way. You're in a very specific way saying there's nothing wrong with you. Your body is showing you an imbalance here, and that's actually something that can be corrected with
Exactly.
natural with
Well,
food
now it could with natural and
or a
possibly
component. Yes,
whatever is needed, but
sure.
you can't dismiss or make light of or take out of the picture the incredibly powerful and central role of food and the very right specific supplementation based on where you're starting. If you
Okay.
do, you can't get the results that you would want. And when
Okay.
you do, this there's no limit to what this can transform and touch in a person. It kind of goes back to your question about how what is this work sort of on the highest level and the most sort
Mhm,
of spiritual level. And
mhm,
what it is I get to see transformation in the absolute highest level imaginable really routinely. And
mm,
it's because we start with these very tangible sort of numbers that we're tracking. And as they change, they lead to transformation on the very highest level that we couldn't even imagine before. And so it feels really nice to be able to be part of that
mm.
for anybody.
What powerful work you are doing in the world. Thank you so much for you really did transform your pain into something so powerful and with so much purpose, and you're helping so many people all over the world, and I'm excited to keep learning more about your work. I feel like we've just kind of scratched the surface of so much fun here that we we could totally nerd out and keep talking about all this stuff. I do want to give you a chance to share with the listeners wherever they are, how can they begin work with you? Of course, I have already started the process of working with your team. I'm really excited to have you back. I hope that you'll come and visit us again. I would like to, when we get to reading my blood and then making my very specific changes so that I can get to optimal metabolic efficiency and then kind of following my journey along the way, I'd love to bring you back and let's talk
Ooh,
about it on the air.
I would love it. One thing that I wanted to touch, just kind of wrapping up where we
Yes.
started, is I came to this with a really extreme hormonal and metabolic problem that looked like it was going to be permanent and possibly get in the way of how I wanted to live my life and being able to
Mhm.
have kids because I always knew I wanted to be a mother. And I it stays as such a profound symbol of the power of this work. So when I was in my 20s, I had these, massively inflamed and enlarged ovaries and all the hormonal problems that went with that. And after 10 years of doing this work and learning from this process and, taking it on, I met my husband and moved to Mexico, and I got pregnant just naturally. And when
Oh.
I was pregnant with my daughter, I had an ultrasound as just part of the getting checked out, and there were no sign in my ovaries that there had ever been a problem.
Oh
And
my
that
gosh.
really shows it's an example of just how powerful the body is and how powerful transformation can be when you go to the extreme of giving the body what it really needs. And then, just as part of that, when I was 25 and I went to that endocrinologist and he did this blood work and saw like a 70-year-old in the blood work,
Mhm.
I do new blood tests very routinely as part of my work, but at 50, if you put those two metabolic profiles side by side, the one at 25 would look far older than the blood work that I have right now at 50. And I just
Crazy.
love sharing that to you, to your listeners, especially to women. Men
Yes.
and women, children, it's for everyone. But for women, I feel like we hear and we tell ourselves so many scary stories about what it means to get older and what it means to like hit these sort of crossroads of like 50. Oh my God, what is it? What do I
Mhm.
have to look forward to? And what
Yes.
I love is that I literally am younger than I was when I was in my 20s. And if that's possible, it just changes everything. And what I feel like this work is really all about is honoring this gift that we've been given. We've been each of us given this little piece of the natural world, which is our body to steward. And I just feel
Yes.
like the greatest act of appreciation and gratitude for this life, that's how I think about it, is just
Mm-hmm.
really caring for this vessel in a very loving way. That's really what
Mm-hmm.
it comes down to. And so that's what I do for myself. And that's what I want to help everyone do. And I love when we get to work with children, because I feel like, wow, if kids could learn this early, this would change everything. If they would start to
Absolutely.
separate out how they feel from who they are, and
Oh,
know that they could get healed in a way that isn't a burden that they have to carry.
right.
It just is such good news that I'm really eager to share.
Yes. Well, you are a bright star. You shine when you talk about this. It's obvious that this lights you up to do this kind of work. And yeah, I'm just really excited to have met you and to know about the work that you're doing in the world. We will definitely link all, your website
Perfect.
and your Instagram and
Those are
all
the
of
two
that.
ways that people reach
Okay.
us typically, is through Instagram and our website. If anyone is interested in working with us, they can reach us through those two channels, and we will get in touch with them and start them on their process. We're based in Mexico, outside of Mexico City, but again, we work in Spanish and English, and we have clients that come to us from everywhere, and they get their blood tests done locally. We can guide you in how to do that, because yes, every client does need to get blood tests, but we've really found a way to support people very, very far from us, and it works very well.
That's incredible. It's very exciting. Sadie, thank you so much. If you have a few extra minutes, I would love to ask you just
Yeah,
some fun questions now for our listeners, just to get to know you a little bit.
that would be a pleasure.
All
Yes.
right, let's do it. So tell us, Sadie, as a kid, what did you always want to be when you grew up?
Okay, that's a funny question. Well, I was raised on this hippie commune where we didn't believe in wearing makeup or jewelry, or really like fixing ourselves up. And
Yeah,
that to
yeah.
me, as a really young kid, was really upsetting. So when I was a little kid, I was like, my whole thing was, but why can't it just be pretty? What's wrong with beauty?
Oh,
Why are we against it? And so when I saw that question, I thought to myself, oh my gosh, the earliest memory of what I wanted to do as a grown up was make people over. And that is actually what I do. But
oh my gosh.
as a little kid, I just wanted to, I could think of all these things that all these ladies who look so tired and kind of worn out, what they could do to like make themselves look prettier. And now it's like my work is really about building beauty from the inside. But it's funny how that it's kind of the
Yeah,
seed of that is very old.
you're right. Yeah, it's the same seed.
It is the same seed.
Okay, which season of the year makes you feel most alive?
That's a good one. Here in Tepoztlan, where I live, we really only have two seasons. We have dry season, which is hot and dry, and we have rainy season. And rainy season is my season. It's like we live in the mountains, and it's kind of the clouds and the mountains are just so beautiful, and we have waterfalls all over in rainy
Mm,
season, and it's a season of such sort of fertility and abundance. And whenever I
mm,
see that season, I feel like my body also responds to it in such a great way. And so it's like rebirthing. And so we go through the dry season where it can be so hard and so hot. And then I know that the rainy season is coming. So that would be my
the
choice.
replenishment. Now I have to ask, are you a water sign?
I'm a Gemini. And
Uh-huh.
so I don't know that much about the meanings of it, but
Yeah, I don't
I,
remember if that one is or not.
yeah, no, I think I'm pretty sure it's air, if I'm not mistaken,
Well,
but
that was my second guess. I was like, I wonder
yeah.
if you're water or air. Interesting. I'm just always curious. I think those are just fun pieces of the puzzle to
It
know,
is. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Sadie, if you had a theme song for every time you made an entrance, what would it be?
That was such a funny question. Well, what came to me is there's a song that's really kind of from my childhood, "Sweet Home Alabama" from Leonard Skinner
Yeah,
would
yeah.
be my song. And I think it's because I was born in Tennessee, and even though I was born in this hippie commune, and we weren't really, the founders didn't come from the South. I
Uh-huh.
feel there's something in me that feels really connected to the
Mm.
South and to Southern I don't know, there's just something in me that really connects to that. And every time I hear that song, especially those first chords in the beginning, I'm like, this is me in my essence, and
I
here I
love
am.
it. The finger picking,
Yeah,
like, I can
exactly,
hear we all
exactly.
know what you're talking
It's
about.
just taken me home to my southern rural roots
I
in a big
love
way.
that. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, this one I'm so excited about from you. Finish this sentence: "When I'm 80, I'll be."
When I'm 80, I'm going to be lifting more weight in the gym than I do now. That's my goal. I
Oh, I
started
love that.
lifting in my 40s. I lift
Uh-huh.
heavy weights because I want my bone density to keep improving. And
Mhm.
lifting weights is one of the only kinds of training that you can get better at 80 than you are at 50. And I'm really excited
Interesting.
about that. And that's why I train this way. I really am thinking about my 80-year-old self when I train. And so that's what came to me.
Oh, that's such a beautiful picture. I love how you say you're thinking about your 80-year-old self when you train. It's like a lot of times we're comparing ourselves to what I was doing when I was 15, what I was doing when I was 25, and you're like, "I'm looking out for 80-year-old me."
No, and not only that, I'm thinking really differently about my even what beauty is at now that I'm 50. I
Uh-huh.
really it really struck me that when I was younger, my goal was to be smaller and sort of
Yeah.
littler. But
Yeah.
now that bone density and vitality and like long-term radiant health is my goal, I
Uh-huh.
realize my goal now is to be dense and to take up space. And that's what I do in the gym. And that's what I want my 80-year-old self to feel as well.
I love that. Take up space, keep expanding, right? I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah.
Uh, Favorite dessert?
Oof. Well, I love to cook and I love to bake. And I would say that I'm a lover of food and rich desserts. And it's funny because I am I work in nutrition, and so many people when they first hear about this work, they think you're going to take away all my pleasures.
Uh-huh.
And I say, you don't understand this. We are all about pleasure and making space for pleasure that doesn't sort of deplete you over time. So the idea is really
Mm.
have all of your deliciousness and know what to do around that so that you're not like pulling yourself down. So like I love like a rich chocolate dessert, and now I know in terms of metabolically when you combine fat and sugar together, it doesn't necessarily spike your blood sugar the way that it would if you just had sugar by itself, or like if you have a rich,
Really?
yeah, and if you have a rich dessert, for example, after a very well balanced meal, we see in the blood test a very, very different result. And so that allows me to sort of touch on something that's really important for my work. It's not about no long term, where we don't have anybody ever on a restrictive diet long term. It's about knowing how to treat yourself, how to really enjoy an abundant and rich life, but also building yourself up on a cellular level and bringing yourself more closer to sort of a state of abundance and sufficiency that will really make your life better. And so it's not,
Mm.
you don't have to quote unquote eat clean and deprive yourself in order
Mhm.
to have that. And very often people who are eating clean are not going in the right direction and they just don't know that.
Absolutely. We all know the junk food vegans and things like that,
Or
you
even
know?
people who are eating healthy, but they're eating way too light for their specific metabolism. And I see this very
Yes.
often for women of my age who are like,
Mhm.
they're eating all the salad and all these very light foods, and they're having
Mhm.
problems with nutrient absorption, bone density, energy,
Mhm.
sleep, all of it. And it starts with not enough nutrient density in their diet. So they're like
Mm.
trying to eat in a way that's actually at odds with what their body needs and wants.
And it comes back to your work being loving. It's about nourishing our body in a loving way, not about restricting it and not allowing it to have any pleasure, right?
It's about pleasure. That's what I would
Right.
say is like I think the reason I was able to change my health was because I didn't come from this background at all. And I thought, I'm going to try to do this by leaning towards curiosity and pleasure instead of trying to avoid things. And that's what
Mm.
allowed me to make this life change and maintain it. That the pleasure component and leaning towards pleasure over time has really allowed for this change to stick And it wasn't just like some kind of thing that I did for a while and gave up on.
Yes.
And that was incredibly key for me and all of my clients. When you put pleasure at the center, it becomes transformative in a super sustainable way.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. That makes sense. All right. Lastly, what is a book you would recommend for everyone to read?
Oof, that's a little bit difficult. But one book that really changed my life, I don't know that I would recommend everybody to read it, but I would
Okay.
say that it's a game changing, life changing book for me. And that was Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Dr. Weston Price, who was a dentist in the 1930s, this is like exactly in a nutshell my approach, and he had the same approach. He was a dentist that he had his career through the early 1900s through the 40s, and he started to see so much more tooth decay in younger and younger people, younger kids. And he asked a very different question than other dentists. He didn't ask, what is the nature of this decay? He asked, who are the people in the world who don't have this decay, and what are they eating? And so he and
Mm,
his wife took all their summer vacations for years and years to go to the most remote places in the 30s to research the mouths of very remote communities. And what he found was miraculous. He found that the healthier the teeth were, the healthier the whole body was, and that healthy teeth really had little to do with dental hygiene and had much more to do with nutritional integrity. And so when people were eating their nutrient dense original diets, their teeth were resistant to cavities and to problems. And when they deviated and they left their community and started eating more degraded, nutrient deficient food, their teeth showed this. But this is the most amazing thing. When they returned to their community and started eating that, putting those nutrient dense foods back, the teeth healed. And
oh,
I was able to
wow.
heal cavities myself with this approach. And it's the original. This book was published in originally in like the 30s, 40s. And the research was done in the 30s. And I feel like my whole life is a testament to this really innovative, very optimistic research that this
Mhm.
dentist did and shared with us in this very groundbreaking book. And now my work is in some way a continuation of that.
That is fascinating. It's also reminding me, I don't know if you've read the book Breath. I can't think of the author right off the top of my head, but
Mm-mm.
he has these similar case studies where it's like they discovered why the human jaw shape was changing over
Oh,
time
yeah.
and the teeth were changing, and it had to do with mouth breathing. And so they,
Mm-hmm.
like, did these studies with people where they made them only breathe out of their mouths, and then their entire body they were, like, dying at the end of 30 days, you know?
Well, so that's an interesting one. Like, so I use the mouth as kind of a microcosm of how is the whole body. So, and
Mhm,
it's one more piece of the puzzle. There's a lot of
mhm,
ways to get at this information, but it all kind of wraps up in the same way. The body will always show us in detail what's happening, what to start with, and what order to take to go in the direction of healing. And the mouth is an example of that. There are lots of others. But what I love about it is that you can look at your tongue, you can look at your teeth and your gums. And if you have problems in your teeth and your gums, and you have a coating on your tongue, you can see for yourself that your body is out of balance and that
mhm.
it needs help.
Right. Ah, well, that is a good place for us to cap for today. Sadie, thank you so much for bringing your insight and your love and your joy today onto Star Potential. And I'm excited to keep the listeners posted on my own journey with the Sadie Kaufman Method, and we'll bring you back to talk about some results.
What a pleasure. I really, Julie Joe, you're doing an amazing work here. And I feel like we have such a rich common ground. Like all
Mhm,
the high level work that you're doing, it touches our work and our passion for helping people just realize their true potential. Like, so we're doing this in all this very tangible way, but it
mhm.
connects to the highest level of the vision that you're sharing. So thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure.
I look forward to talking soon.
Wow, what did you think of that episode? Let's go over some of our key takeaways. 1. Not only can food be medicine, but it can be shockingly powerful medicine. 2. The body wants to heal. Once we know what to do, we can give it what it needs to do its job, and wild transformation is possible. 3. When it comes to aging, younger people just have more energy to cover their symptoms. It's not necessarily that they are healthier. 4. When you go from a cellular state of emergency to a cellular state of sufficiency, you will experience amazing transformation inside and out. The law of attraction of the cells, as Sadie calls it, allows us to become the change we want to see in the world. 5. You can't lie to your body on the cellular level, and your body will never lie to you. 6. Fix yourself metabolically and see the ripples take effect in real time. 7. How you feel is not the definition of who you are. 8. Change is not about deprivation, but nourishment. When you put pleasure at the center, it becomes transformative in a super sustainable way. I will link Sadie's Instagram and website in the show notes so you can go there to get in touch with her. You can also reach out to me directly and I would be happy to put you in touch. I can't wait to keep you posted on my journey with the Sadie Kaufman Method. Thanks for listening. And as always, I would love to hear your key takeaways from this episode. Be sure to reach out to me on Instagram at @thejuliejo and send me your thoughts. If you're interested in a bit of accountability, curiosity, I've started a Facebook group for us called the Star Potential Galaxy. Search for us on Facebook and send a request. We'd love to invite you into our community. Thank you for tuning into Star Potential with Julie Jo Hughes. If this episode resonates with you, please leave a quick 5-star rating or shout us out on Instagram with the tag @thejuliejo. That's TheJuliejo. I made you a gift. Please visit us on Instagram to receive my Grounded in Gratitude singing meditation. Want a shot at our monthly giveaway? Please leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts with your email or Instagram handle so we can give you credit. Thank you for your love and support. Until next time, keep shining your light, and that's a wrap.